There is a story from the early texts of a merchant who came to the Buddha with a question that had troubled him for years. He lived in a town where his livelihood depended on trade, on negotiation, on knowing when to speak and when to hold back information that might cost him a sale. He was not a cruel man. He did not steal. He did not cheat in ways that were obvious. But he lived in the space between complete honesty and survival. And he wanted to know if this made him a person who could not walk the path. The Buddha did not answer immediately. He asked the merchant to describe a single transaction. The merchant spoke of selling cloth, of knowing there was a small flaw in the weave that a customer had not noticed, of saying nothing because no question had been asked. The Buddha listened. Then he asked the merchant how his body had felt in that moment. The merchant paused. He said his chest had tightened, his breath had become shallow, he had looked away. This is where right action begins. Not in a list of rules handed down from above, but in the body's quiet testimony. We live in a world that is far more complicated than a simple exchange of cloth in a marketplace, and yet the principle remains the same. Right action is not about perfection. It is not about never making a mistake or never being caught in a situation where every choice feels compromised. It is about learning to feel the difference between actions that create tightness and actions that allow the breath to move freely. Think of integrity, not as a wall you build around yourself, but as a river that finds its course. A river does not force its way through stone. It moves around obstacles. It finds the path of least resistance, but it does not stop moving. It does not become stagnant. When debris blocks its flow, pressure builds until the water finds another way or the debris shifts. The river's nature is to flow. Your nature, underneath all the complexity and compromise, is to move toward what feels open rather than what feels closed. Right now, wherever you are, you can notice your breath. You do not need to change it, just feel it moving in and out. Notice if your chest is tight or open. Notice if your shoulders are drawn up or resting. The body knows the difference between actions that align with your deeper intention and actions that do not. This knowing is not loud. It does not announce itself with trumpets. It is the quiet sensation of constriction or ease. In the Buddhist framework, right action is traditionally described as abstaining from killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. These are not arbitrary commandments. They are observations about what creates suffering and what creates the conditions for suffering to decrease. But the texts also make clear that right action is not only about what you refrain from doing. It is about what you choose to do. It is about the quality of attention you bring to each choice. The merchant in the story was not asked to abandon his livelihood. He was not told that trade itself was wrong. He was invited to notice the feeling in his body when he acted in a way that created distance between his inner experience and his outer behavior. That distance is where suffering grows. Not because you are bad, but because misalignment creates friction, and friction creates heat, and heat creates discomfort that spreads into every corner of your life. You know this already. You have felt it when you said yes, but meant no. When you stayed silent and later wished you had spoken. When you spoke and immediately wanted to pull the words back. The body registers these moments before the mind creates a story about them. The tightness comes first. The justification comes after. Right action asks you to stay close to that first signal, not to judge it, but to notice it, to let it inform your next choice and the choice after that. This is not about becoming a saint. It is about becoming someone who can trust their own inner compass because they have learned to feel its movement. The river does not always flow smoothly. Sometimes it encounters a steep descent and becomes a waterfall, loud and turbulent. Sometimes it spreads wide and shallow across flat land, barely moving at all. But it continues to find its way. It does not stop being a river because the terrain changes. Living with integrity in a complicated world means allowing yourself to be in motion. It means noticing when you have stopped flowing, when you have built a dam out of fear or convenience or the belief that you have no other choice. And then it means finding, with patience, where the water wants to go. We live in a world where almost nothing happens in isolation. You buy a shirt and somewhere a thread was spun. You send a message and someone's evening shifts. You choose silence and a conversation never begins. The stone drops and the water remembers. This is the nature of action. It moves outward. It touches what we cannot see. And because we cannot see it all, we tell ourselves the ripples do not matter, or that they are too vast to consider, or that someone else is responsible for the water. But the Buddha observed something simpler. He noticed that actions rooted in greed bring a particular kind of suffering. Actions rooted in hatred bring another. Actions rooted in delusion, where we do not see clearly what is actually happening, bring confusion that spreads. And actions rooted in generosity, in kindness, in clarity, bring something else. They bring a kind of peace that also moves outward long after the moment has passed. This is not a moral law handed down. It is an observation about cause and effect. When you act from grasping, the grasping does not end with the action. It continues. It shapes the next moment. When you act from aversion, the aversion lingers. It colors what comes after. The ripples do not stop at the edge of your intention. You might notice this in small ways first. You speak sharply because you are tired, and the sharpness sits in the room longer than the words. Someone else carries it into their next conversation. Or you offer your seat on the bus without thinking, and the person who sits down softens just slightly, and maybe they are a little softer with the next person they meet. The stone has already sunk, but the water is still moving. The difficulty is that we rarely see the full pattern. We see the stone, we see the first ripple, then we look away. We assume the water returns to stillness on its own. But it does not. It keeps moving until it meets something else, another stone, another ripple, the edge of the pond. So we act in a fog. We make decisions based on what we want in this moment, or what we are avoiding, or what we have convinced ourselves is true, without looking closely. And because we do not see the ripples, we do not connect our small actions to the larger shape of our lives. We wonder why we feel uneasy. We wonder why the same conflicts return. We wonder why peace feels so far away. The teaching is not that you must predict every consequence. That is not possible. The teaching is that you can notice what is driving the action before the stone leaves your hand. Before you speak, before you move, before you decide, there is a feeling. Sometimes it is a tightness in the chest. Sometimes it is a pulling forward, a leaning towards something you want to grasp. Sometimes it is a pushing away, a recoil from what you do not want to face. Sometimes it is a blur, a sense that you are moving fast because stopping would mean feeling something uncomfortable. This is where the practice lives. Not in the grand ethical dilemma, though it applies there too, but in the small moment, the unremarkable one, where you are about to act and you do not yet know why. You pause. You do not freeze. You do not overthink. You simply notice what is present. Is this impulse rooted in wanting something for yourself at the expense of clarity? Is it rooted in pushing something away because it is unpleasant? Is it rooted in a story you are telling yourself that you have not examined? Or is it rooted in something more spacious? A genuine care, a clarity about what is actually needed, a willingness to meet the moment as it is, not as you wish it to be. The difference is subtle, but it is not invisible. When you act from grasping, there is a tightness. When you act from aversion, there is a hardness. When you act from delusion, there is a haze. When you act from generosity or kindness or clarity, there is a softness, even if the action itself is firm. You begin to feel the difference not by thinking about it, but by pausing long enough to notice what is already there. The impulse has a texture, the feeling has a shape, and in that pause, a choice becomes possible. Not a choice between good and bad, but a choice between reacting from a tight place and responding from a spacious one. The ripples still move outward, but the quality of the ripples changes. A stone dropped in haste churns the water differently than a stone placed with care. Both create movement. Both touch the far edges, but one carries turbulence and the other carries something quieter. This is integrity in a complicated world, not the absence of consequence, not the certainty of outcome, but the willingness to pause, to notice what is driving you, and to choose again and again the action that comes from clarity rather than confusion, from care rather than contraction. The water will move regardless. The question is what you are sending into it. We often think of integrity as something we build, something we earn through effort and discipline. We imagine it as a tower we construct, brick by careful brick, until we stand tall enough to be called good. But this understanding carries a weight that integrity itself does not require. Integrity is not an achievement. It is simply what happens when the inside and the outside match. Think of a door that closes flush in its frame. There is no gap between the wood and the threshold, no resistance when you press it shut. The door is not trying to fit, it simply does. The frame was made for this door, or the door was made for this frame, and now when they meet, they rest together without force. This is what the early teachings point toward when they speak of one who acts in harmony with their speech and thought. Such a person walks lightly in the world, not because they have perfected themselves, but because there is no friction between what they feel, what they say, and what they do. The three move together, like breath moving through the body. Most of us live with small gaps. We feel tired but say we are fine. We feel uncertain but speak with confidence. We want to say no, but our mouth forms the word yes. These gaps are not sins, they are not failures of character. They are simply misalignments, and misalignments create friction. Friction creates effort. Effort creates exhaustion. The world asks us to manage appearances. We learn early that what we show must sometimes differ from what we feel. This is not always wrong. There are moments when kindness asks us to hold back a sharp truth, when patience asks us to soften a reaction. But somewhere in this learning, we begin to believe that the gap itself is normal. We begin to think that integrity means maintaining the gap skillfully, managing the distance between inner and outer with enough grace that no one notices. But a door that almost closes still lets in the draft. The teaching does not ask us to become transparent, to spill every inner movement into the outer world. It asks us to notice the cost of the gap, to feel what happens in the body when we say one thing and mean another, to sense the small tightening in the chest, the brief holding of breath, the subtle clench in the jaw. The body knows the gap. The body carries the weight of it. Integrity, then, is not about always speaking our truth loudly. It is about knowing when the gap is there. It is about feeling the misalignment as it happens, not as a moral failure, but as a physical fact. This is where the practice begins. Not in grand gestures of honesty, but in one small moment of noticing. You might notice it today, perhaps in a conversation where someone asks how you are. You might feel the automatic response rising, the polite phrase that costs nothing. And just before it leaves your mouth, you might sense whether it matches what is actually present. Not to change what you say necessarily, but simply to know, to feel the difference, if there is one, between the inner weather and the outer words. Or you might notice it in a moment of decision. Someone asks for your time, your help, your attention. You feel the no rising, but the yes is already forming. Just there, in that split second, there is a gap. a door that does not quite meet its frame. You might feel it as a small tension, a hesitation, a sense of something not quite settled. This noticing is not meant to create more rules. It is not meant to make you more careful, more controlled, more perfect. It is simply an invitation to feel what alignment feels like and what misalignment feels like. To know the difference in your own body, in your own experience. When the door closes flush, there is a quiet click, a sense of rest. The structure holds without strain. This is what it feels like when words match feeling, when action matches intention. Not righteous, not proud, just easeful. The body relaxes slightly. The breath moves without catching. We have been taught to monitor our behavior from the outside, to check whether we appear consistent, whether others see us as reliable. But integrity is an inside experience first. It is the felt sense of coherence. When we act in harmony with what we actually think and feel, something in us settles. We walk more lightly, not because we have become better people, but because we are carrying less. The gaps we maintain require energy. Each misalignment is a small load. We track what we said versus what we meant. We manage the distance. We remember which version of ourselves we showed to whom. This tracking happens mostly beneath awareness, but it accumulates, it weighs. When you notice even one moment today where your words matched your actual feeling, let yourself feel that match, not as a success, but as a simple fact. The door met the frame. There was no gap, and for that moment you walked lightly. The body knows before the mind catches up. You feel the tightness in your chest before you realize you're about to say something you don't mean. Your stomach drops before you understand why the email you're writing feels wrong. There's a trembling in your hands before you notice you're about to agree to something that violates what matters to you. We've learned to override these signals. We tell ourselves the discomfort is irrational, that we're being too sensitive, that we need to be practical. The mind builds a case. It lists reasons. It compares outcomes. It calculates social costs. And somewhere beneath all that reasoning, the body sits quietly, holding a truth the mind doesn't want to hear. In Zen practice, there's a recognition that runs beneath all the koans and sitting. The body sits in truth, while the mind argues with it. This isn't mystical. It's observable. When you're about to do something that conflicts with your integrity, your body registers it first, not as a thought, but as sensation, a tightening, a heat, a hollowness, a subtle wrongness that doesn't come with words attached. Think of a compass needle trembling toward north. It doesn't debate, it doesn't weigh options. It responds to something real, something present, something it cannot ignore. The needle shivers and settles, always returning to the same direction. Your body does this too. It orients toward integrity the way a compass orients toward magnetic north, not through moral reasoning, but through direct response. The complication is that we live in a world that asks us to ignore the compass, to smile when we feel contracted, to agree when something in us pulls back, to stay when the body is already turning toward the door. We're told this is maturity, professionalism, kindness. And sometimes it is. But often we've simply learned to dismiss the body's information as inconvenient. Right action, in the Buddhist sense, isn't about following rules. It's about learning to read what's already present. The body doesn't lie about harm. When you're about to speak harshly, there's a sensation. When you're about to take something that isn't yours, there's a sensation. When you're about to break a promise, there's a sensation. These aren't punishments, they're information. The difficulty is that the sensations are quiet. They don't shout, they don't override your thoughts. They wait, like that compass needle trembling in your hand, subtle and persistent and honest. If you're not paying attention, you'll miss them entirely. You'll make the decision, take the action, and only later feel the residue of having moved against yourself. This is where practice becomes concrete. Before a difficult conversation, before you send the message, before you make the choice, there's a moment available. You can place one hand on your chest and feel 3 breaths. Not to calm yourself down, not to prepare a script, just to notice what's there. 1 breath and you might feel tightness. 2 breaths and you might notice your jaw is clenched. 3 breaths and something clarifies. Not always a solution, but a recognition. The body is saying something. It might be fear, yes, but it might also be wisdom. It might be the part of you that knows this conversation requires honesty you're not planning to offer, or that the easy answer will create a problem you'll have to live with. This isn't about always following the body's first response. Sometimes the tightness is old fear, not present truth. Sometimes the discomfort is just discomfort, the natural friction of being alive and having to make choices. But you can't know the difference if you don't stop to feel. When you place your hand on your chest and breathe, you're not asking the body for permission, you're asking it for information. What does it know that you've been talking over? Where is the compass pointing beneath all your reasons and justifications? The practice is simple because it has to be. In the moment before you act, you don't have time for elaborate reflection. You have 3 breaths. You have the pressure of your hand against your ribs. You have whatever sensation is present. That's enough. Right action emerges from this attention. Not from trying harder to be good, but from learning to feel the trembling of the compass needle. From trusting that the body registers integrity and its absence in ways the thinking mind cannot. From letting that quiet, persistent honesty inform what you do next. The body doesn't argue. It doesn't make speeches about ethics. It simply responds to what's real. And when you learn to listen, even briefly, even imperfectly, you begin to move through the world differently. Not because you've memorized better rules, but because you've learned to trust the source of ethical information that's been present all along. There are moments when every door you face seems to lead through some kind of pain. You want to do the right thing, but the right thing is not clear. One choice protects someone you love, but leaves another person out in the cold. Another choice honors your truth, but disappoints someone who depends on you. And so you stand there frozen because you believe that if you were wiser or kinder or more careful, you could find the door that hurts no one at all. But that door does not exist. A surgeon's incision cuts through skin, it draws blood, it creates a wound that will ache for days. And yet the surgeon does not hesitate, because the cut is also the path to healing. The knife moves with precision, not because it avoids harm, but because it meets harm with clarity. The surgeon knows that some pain is the cost of care. This is not permission to be careless. It is not an excuse to harm without thought. It is a recognition that integrity in a complicated world does not mean finding the spotless path. It means walking the path that holds the least harm and the most honesty, even when your hands shake. The teaching from the Mahayana tradition is quiet but firm. The Bodhisattva does not seek a world without difficulty. The Bodhisattva meets difficulty with a clear heart. This is not about being strong or unshakable. It is about being willing to see what is actually in front of you without demanding that it be simpler than it is. When you freeze in the doorway, it is often because you are asking yourself the wrong question. You are asking, how can I avoid causing pain? But that question has no answer. Pain is already present. It is woven into the situation before you even arrive. The question that can be answered is this: which path holds the least harm and the most honesty? Notice that this question does not promise comfort. It does not guarantee that everyone will understand. It simply asks you to look clearly at what is true and what is kind, and to choose from there. Imagine you are standing between two people you care about, and they want different things from you. One needs you to stay, one needs you to go. You cannot do both. If you stay, you will feel the weight of the one who needed you to leave. If you go, you will carry the disappointment of the one who needed you to stay. Either way, something will hurt. The paralysis comes when you believe that the hurt is evidence of your failure. But the hurt is not failure. The hurt is the texture of being human in a world where needs do not always align. The surgeon's incision does not fail because it cuts. It succeeds because it cuts in the right place, at the right depth, with a steady hand. So you ask the question, which path holds the least harm and the most honesty? You do not ask it once and walk away. You ask it while sitting still. You ask it while noticing the tightness in your chest and the way your mind keeps searching for the perfect answer. You ask it while letting go of the fantasy that you can control how others will feel. Least harm does not mean no harm. It means you are willing to see the consequences clearly without inflating them and without minimizing them. Most honesty does not mean brutal honesty. It means you are not hiding from yourself. You are not pretending you do not know what you know. This is where compassion lives. Not in the absence of difficulty, but in the willingness to meet difficulty without collapsing. Compassion does not mean you can save everyone from pain. It means you can hold your own heart steady while you make the choice that aligns with what is true. Sometimes the choice will be misunderstood. Sometimes you will be called selfish or cold or wrong. And you'll have to let that land without defending yourself into knots. Because the question was never, how can I make everyone agree that I am good? The question was, which path holds the least harm and the most honesty? The surgeon does not ask the tissue for permission. The surgeon knows that healing sometimes requires a wound. And after the incision is made, there is care, there is attention, there is the slow work of tending to what has been opened. You can hold complexity without collapsing into paralysis. You can see that the world is not simple and still take a step. You can cause some pain and still be a person of integrity. The clear heart is not the heart that never struggles. It is the heart that struggles and still chooses, that cuts when cutting is the kindest thing, that walks through the door it can actually walk through. We spend so much of our lives believing that action means doing something, fixing, speaking, adjusting, moving toward. And there is a kind of panic that rises when we sense a problem but do nothing about it. The mind says, you should respond. You should have something to say. You should make this better. But not every fire needs more wood. Some need only space to burn out. This is not a teaching about laziness. It is not permission to turn away from what matters. It is something quieter than that. It is the recognition that sometimes the most honest response is restraint. That sometimes integrity lives not in what we do, but in what we choose not to do. A tree in winter does not look productive. It stands bare, branches empty, offering nothing that we can see. And yet it is still alive, still drawing water through its roots, still holding its shape against the wind. It is not pushing. It is not performing growth. It is simply being what it is in the season it finds itself in. We do not call this passivity, we call it winter. And yet when we encounter a moment in our own lives that asks for stillness, we resist. Someone says something unkind, and the impulse rises to correct them. A situation unfolds badly, and we feel we must intervene. A silence opens in conversation, and we rush to fill it. We believe that to do nothing is to fail. But the impulse to act is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is only restlessness wearing the mask of responsibility. There is a difference between responding and reacting. A response comes from clarity. A reaction comes from the need to discharge discomfort, and much of what we call action is simply the latter. We speak because the silence feels unbearable. We fix because the brokenness makes us anxious. We move because stillness feels like stagnation. The teaching does not ask us to stop caring. It asks us to notice when our action is feeding a fire that would naturally subside. When our involvement is not helping but prolonging. When our need to do something is stronger than the situation's need for our doing. This is delicate ground, because we have also been taught that silence can be complicity, that inaction can be harm. And this is true. There are fires that do need water. There are moments that require our voice, our presence, our intervention. But not every moment is that moment. And learning to tell the difference is part of what it means to live with integrity in a complicated world. A tree in winter is not indifferent to the cold. It feels the frost. It endures the wind. But it does not try to become summer. It does not push leaves into existence because it thinks it should be doing more. It allows the season to be what it is. And in that allowing, it survives. Today you might try this. Let one impulse to speak or fix simply pass without acting on it. Not the important ones, not the moments where your voice truly matters, but the small ones. The urge to correct someone's minor mistake, the need to fill an awkward pause, the impulse to send a message that does not need sending. Just notice it arise. Feel the pressure of it in your chest or throat, the way it insists, the way it says this matters, you must respond, and then let it pass. Not because you are suppressing it, not because you are forcing yourself to be calm, but because you are curious about what happens when you do not feed it, when you do not add wood to that particular fire. You may find that the impulse fades, that the moment resolves itself without your intervention, that the silence you feared was actually spacious, not empty, that the problem you wanted to fix was not yours to solve. Or you may find that the impulse remains, that it clarifies into something that truly does need your response. And then you act. But you act from stillness, not from the panic of needing to act. This is not a rule, it is an experiment, a way of testing whether your action comes from integrity or from the fear of appearing passive. Because stillness is not the same as passivity. Passivity is collapse. It is turning away because we cannot bear to look. Stillness is presence without grasping. It is the tree in winter, alive and rooted, simply not pushing. And sometimes that is the most honest thing we can offer. Not our solutions, not our words, just our willingness to be present without needing to change what is. The fire burns, and we do not add wood, and eventually it burns itself out. And what remains is not damage, but clarity, the ground ready for whatever comes next. You plant a seed in spring. You choose what kind of seed it will be. You prepare the soil, water it, set it in a place where light can reach. But the weather that follows is not yours to control. Rain may come heavy or not at all. Wind may arrive at the wrong time. The seed you planted with care may grow into something different than you pictured, or it may not grow at all. This is what happens when we act in the world. We shape our intentions. We make a choice about what we want to offer. But the outcome moves through conditions we did not create and cannot fully see. The difficulty is this: you know your own intention. You feel it forming inside you. You remember the care you took, the kindness you meant to offer, the harm you tried to avoid. But others do not see that inner movement. They see only what happened. They see the words that landed wrong, the silence that felt like coldness, the help that became a burden. And so you are judged by a fruit you did not entirely grow. This gap can feel unbearable. You meant well, and still someone was hurt. You tried to be generous, and still the gesture fell flat. The mind rushes in to defend itself or to collapse in shame. Both responses come from the same misunderstanding, the belief that intention alone should be enough, or that outcome alone tells the whole truth. The Buddha pointed to something quieter. He said that intention shapes the seed. It matters what you choose to plant. A seed of kindness is not the same as a seed of cruelty, even if neither grows the way you expected. Intention sets a direction. It creates a tendency. But it does not control the weather. Conditions shape the fruit. The soil, the season, the presence or absence of rain. All of this matters too. Both are real. Both count. This is not about excusing harm. If your action caused pain, that pain is real regardless of what you meant. The person across from you does not feel your intention. They feel the impact. To dismiss that because your heart was pure is to cling to only half of what happened. But it is also not about erasing intention. If you acted with care, with attention, with the best understanding you had in that moment, that is also real. It does not undo the outcome, but it is not nothing. To collapse entirely into shame, to say that only the result matters and your effort was worthless, is to cling to the other half and lose your balance. What the teaching asks is that you hold both. You can notice your intention without using it as a shield. You can see the outcome without letting it crush you. This is where integrity lives, not in perfection, but in honest seeing. Reflect on one recent action. It does not need to be large. Perhaps you offered advice that was not received well. Perhaps you stayed quiet when someone needed support. Perhaps you tried to help and made things harder instead. Bring it to mind gently, without immediately defending or condemning yourself. First, notice your intention. What were you trying to do? What did you hope would happen? Let yourself see that clearly. Do not rush past it. Your intention was shaped by causes too, by what you understood in that moment, by your own history, by the conditions inside you at the time. It arose. It was real. Now notice what actually happened, not what you wish had happened. Not what you think should have happened if the world were fair, just what occurred. How did your words land? What did the other person experience? What unfolded in the space after you acted? Let that be real too, even if it is uncomfortable. You are not trying to decide which one matters more. You are learning to see that both are true at once. The seed you planted was shaped by your intention. The fruit that grew was shaped by conditions. Some of those conditions were inside your control, many were not. The weather is never entirely yours. This does not mean you stop trying. You still choose your seeds with care. You still tend the soil. You still learn from what grows and what does not. But you stop demanding that your intention alone should have been enough. And you stop believing that a difficult outcome means your intention was worthless. Impermanence runs through all of this. The moment you acted is already gone. The intention that seemed so clear has dissolved. The outcome is changing even now, rippling into new conditions you cannot see. Nothing is fixed. You are not locked into being the person who caused harm, and you are not guaranteed to be the person who helps. Each moment is a new seed, a new season, a new weather. When you can hold both intention and outcome without clinging to either, something softens. You see that you are responsible for your choices and also held by conditions larger than yourself. You stop needing to be either perfectly blameless or completely at fault. You can act with care, notice what happens, and adjust. This is what it means to live with integrity in a world that does not bend to your will. The seed and the weather. Both matter. Neither one is the whole story. We talk about transformation as if it arrives all at once. A moment of clarity, a decision that changes everything. We imagine ourselves waking up one morning with new habits, new speech, new ways of moving through the world. But the morning comes and we are still ourselves. The gap between what we said we would do and what we actually do widens just a little more. Right action is not waiting for that grand arrival. It is noticing the small screw that has come loose and tightening it before the hinge gives way entirely. This is not glamorous. No one will see you do it. But the door will open smoothly tomorrow because you attended to what loosened today. The Buddha spoke often about integrity, about aligning our actions with our understanding, not as a distant ideal, but as something that shows up in how we answer a question, how we handle money, how we keep or break the small agreements we make. A house is kept sound not by one great repair, but by tending to what loosens each day. The teaching is simple. The application asks us to notice what we have been stepping over. You might have told someone you would call them back. You might have said you would go to bed earlier, drink more water, stop checking your phone first thing in the morning. These are not moral failures. They are just the places where intention and action have drifted apart. The gap is so small at first that it seems harmless, but gaps accumulate. The hinge loosens a little more each time the door swings open. Eventually something breaks, and we wonder how it happened all at once. It did not happen all at once. Right action begins with seeing this clearly. Not with shame, not with a long list of everything we have failed to do, but with the simple recognition that integrity is maintained through small, repeated gestures. You tighten the screw today. Tomorrow you check another one. This is how a house remains sound. The practice here is concrete. Look at the last few days. What did you say you would do? It does not need to be large. In fact, it is better if it is not. A small promise is easier to keep, and keeping it matters more than the promise itself. Maybe you said you would take a walk. Maybe you said you would reply to a message. Maybe you told yourself you would sit for 5 minutes without distraction. Choose one. Just one. And today, keep it. Not because you are trying to become a better person, not because you are proving something to yourself or anyone else, but because this is what right action looks like in practice. It is the decision to align what you do with what you said, even when no one is watching, even when it would be easier not to. When you keep that small promise, something shifts. Not dramatically. You will not feel like a different person. But you will have tightened one screw. The hinge will hold a little better. And tomorrow, when you make another small promise, you will remember that keeping it is possible. This is how integrity is built. Not through sweeping declarations or sudden transformations, but through the steady accumulation of small alignments. Each one matters. Each one is a choice to close the gap between intention and action. To stop waiting for the perfect moment and simply tend to what is loose right now. The difficulty is that these small promises feel insignificant. We want our actions to mean something. We want to see progress, to feel that we are moving towards something larger. But right action does not always feel like progress. It feels like maintenance. It feels like tightening a screw that no one else will notice in a part of the house that seems fine for now. But you notice, and the house notices. Over time, the difference between a structure that is tended and one that is neglected becomes obvious. Doors that once stuck now open easily. Floors that once creaked are solid underfoot. The repairs were small, but their absence would have been costly. This is not about perfection. You will forget some promises. You will let some screws stay loose. That is part of living in a complicated world. But when you notice, you can choose to return. You can choose to pick up the screwdriver again, to make the small adjustment, to keep the promise you set aside yesterday. Right action is not distant. It is here, in the next hour, in the next choice. It is the decision to keep one small promise today, and to see that as enough, not as a step towards some future version of yourself, but as the work itself. The hinge holds because you tended to it. The house remains sound because you did not wait for collapse to begin repairs. Integrity is daily maintenance, quiet and unglamorous, and entirely within reach. You stand at the edge of a choice, and the mind says, "Not yet. Tell me what will happen. Show me the outcome first. Then I will act." But the future does not arrive early for inspection. You wait for clarity that feels like daylight, bright and unmistakable. You wait for a sign, for certainty, for the fog to lift completely. And while you wait, life continues. The moment that asks for your response has already moved. This is the bind. We believe integrity means knowing we are right before we step. We think acting with care requires a map of all consequences, a guarantee we will not cause harm, proof that this choice aligns with every principle we hold. So we hesitate, we research, we imagine outcomes until the imagination itself becomes another layer of fog. But walking at dusk does not work this way. You cannot see the full path. The horizon blurs into grey. Trees lose their edges. The road ahead may curve out of sight after a few steps. And yet the ground beneath your foot, right now, is solid. You can feel it, the texture is real. That next step, just ahead, is visible enough. Right action does not ask you to see the end. It asks you to meet what is here. The teaching does not say, "Wait until you are certain." It says the wise one walks forward even when the path is dim, trusting each step as it comes. Not blind trust, not reckless movement, but trust in your capacity to meet the ground as it appears. This is where equanimity enters, not as detachment, not as cold neutrality. Equanimity here is the steadiness that lets you act without demanding the future collapse into certainty first. It is the quiet that can hold not knowing and still move. You might notice how the mind tightens around an unresolved question. There is a physical quality to it, a clenching in the chest, a loop in the thought stream. The question returns again and again. Should I speak or stay silent? Should I leave or stay? Should I intervene or step back? And underneath the question is a demand. Give me the right answer. Now. But some questions do not resolve on command. Some choices cannot be researched into clarity. You can gather information, you can consult your values, and still the outcome remains unknown. This is not a failure of preparation. This is the nature of a complicated world. What if you sat with one unresolved question today without trying to answer it? Not forever, just for now. Let it exist in the room with you, the way dusk exists, neither day nor night, just this in-between light. Notice what happens when you stop demanding it resolve. Notice if the tightness shifts. Notice if something underneath the urgency becomes visible. The question does not need to be large. It might be small and daily. It might be whether to send a message, whether to say yes to a request, whether to bring something up or let it pass. The size does not matter. What matters is the willingness to let it remain open while you breathe. This is not avoidance. Avoidance turns away. This practice turns toward the question and stops trying to force it closed. There is a difference. When you walk at dusk, you do not stop moving because you cannot see the distant hills. You look at what is near. You notice the edge of the path, the shift in texture underfoot, the shape of the next few steps. You move with what is visible. And then the next portion becomes visible, and you move again. Right action in uncertainty works this way. You cannot see the whole consequence of your choice. You cannot know if this will unfold the way you hope. But you can sense what this moment asks. You can feel whether your intention is rooted in care or in fear, in grasping or in letting be. You can notice the ground right here. Integrity is not the absence of doubt. Integrity is acting in alignment with what you can see, even when the rest remains dim. It is speaking the truth you know while holding lightly the truth you do not. It is making the choice that feels most honest to this moment and then meeting what comes without collapsing into regret. The wise one does not wait for perfect light. The wise one walks. We spent this time together looking at the ways we move through the world, the choices we make with our bodies, the impact of our presence on others, the quiet question that lives underneath action. What serves? What harms? Right action isn't a checklist you complete. It's not a moral grade you earn. It's more like learning to walk on uneven ground. You feel your way forward. You notice when the path shifts. You adjust. Some days you'll act with clarity. Other days you'll stumble. You'll say the wrong thing. You'll choose convenience over care. You'll forget what you know. This is not failure. This is the texture of a human life. The Buddha didn't teach perfection. He taught direction. He taught noticing. When you harm, you feel it. When you act with care, you feel that too. The body knows before the mind explains. There's a tightness that comes with deception, a settling that comes with honesty. You don't need a philosophy degree to sense the difference. What makes this practice sustainable is that you're not trying to become someone else. You're learning to trust what's already here. The capacity to pause, the ability to feel the weight of a choice before you make it, the small mercy of beginning again when you've lost your way. In a complicated world, you won't always know the right move. The systems we live inside are tangled. Your coffee touches 100 hands before it reaches you. Your phone carries invisible histories. You can't trace every thread, but you can tend to what's in front of you. The person standing close, the animal crossing your path, the moment asking for your attention. Right action grows from this kind of intimacy. Not grand gestures, not purity, just the willingness to see what's here and respond without turning away. You'll meet people who are certain they have the answers. They'll tell you exactly how to live, what to eat, what to buy, who to be. Some of their guidance may be useful, but the deepest integrity doesn't come from following someone else's map. It comes from learning to listen, to the quiet voice that knows when something's off, to the ease that arrives when you are aligned with care. This listening is a practice. You won't master it. You'll return to it again and again. In the middle of a conversation, at the grocery store, in the space between wanting and choosing. Each time you pause, you're strengthening something, not willpower, something softer than that. Presence, maybe. The ability to stay with what's difficult without collapsing or running. The world will keep being complicated. It will keep presenting you with impossible choices. You'll do your best, you'll fall short, you'll carry regret. You'll also surprise yourself with moments of unexpected kindness. Both are part of the path. What matters is that you keep walking, that you don't harden into righteousness or collapse into cynicism, that you let your actions be guided by something deeper than fear or image or the pressure to perform goodness for an audience. Right action is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It's the choice no one sees. The moment you pause instead of react, the small repair you make after causing harm, the way you meet your own mistakes without cruelty. This is enough. You are enough. Not because you're perfect, but because you're here, trying, feeling your way forward with whatever clarity you can find. If you'd like to continue, there are other reflections waiting. But there's no rush. You can simply sit for a while. Let your attention come back to your breath now, the rise and fall, the way air moves in and out without effort, your body breathing itself. Notice where you're sitting, the weight of you held by what's beneath you, the temperature of the air on your skin. Let the ideas settle. Let the words fade. What remains is this: breath, body, the simple fact of being here. Rest in that for as long as you like.